So our concerns are no longer oriented towards time and space. Now, being that we live in time and space, this can be a very threatening experience, especially if we are conditioned to be rooted in the concerns of time and space. You know, what am I going to get to eat next? How am I going to pay my bills? Where am I going to, live? What's the stability of my country? All these things are concerns of time and space. But as I started studying and realizing the perspectives of other mystics and spiritual authors and teachers, I was reminded of Nietzsche terming heaven as an otherworldly afterlife, and how the otherworldly afterlife, the way he was terming it, I can't remember the exact quote, but it was secondary to him. The primary thing are the concerns of time and space. We need to stay rooted in time and space. And that if we make our goal some otherworldly afterlife, then the concerns of time and space are secondary. But as I read Joseph Campbell, he brought to the forefront of my awareness that pleasure can only be experienced here in time and space. That which is completely transcendent is beyond all categories of thought. I think that this is Kant, the Critique of Pure Reason, or something to do with the science of a metaphysic. And that's all these ideas culminated in my perspective that there is no identity, individual identity, in the transcendent, in the otherworldly, the heaven realm. Because all is unified, all is one. It's unity, and since all is unified in one, there is no individual identity, and individual identity is where pleasure exists, has existence. In time and space. Time and space is where pleasure exists. Or, let us say, can be experienced. So in this coming to awareness of these ideas of pleasure and how pleasure arises, I came to view that there was an evaluation that occurs. We have to give pleasure a value. We have to value our pleasures. But being that we live in time, and the concerns of time and space, and the threats that are about us at all times, in order to value pleasure above other things, I mean, if we're honestly going to encompass a holistic picture of it, we have to also include that there is a state of vulnerability, and that vulnerability can be threatening. And so in a threatening situation, we want to try to control. Control the outcome. So I started talking to my friends about how I afford myself the opportunity to enjoy myself. Just like people afford themselves the opportunity to be in an argument and to be conflicting. And I saw that this inner conflict, that by affording oneself conflict, it can show an inner experience of the struggle to surrender to pleasure. And then comes in all these ideas of habitual behavior, mental disorders that recreate a dysfunctional situation rather than create a functional one. It became very clear to me that we afford ourselves the opportunity to feel pleasure, but oftentimes I have seen people only be able to afford themselves the opportunity to have pleasure if they are in control. And this control limits the amount of pleasure they have, because the more control you have, the less one surrenders to pleasure. And then I realized that, this is a very personal and unique experience to surrender to pleasure. And then I saw how, many people think that they can only have depth level pleasure with very specific kinds of people in very specific types of situation. There is a time and a place for everything, and everything in its time and place, very ordered. And then I started realizing that many of these times and places, these categories, these specific little areas where people feel pleasure is safe to surrender to, many of them are imprinted into them. And the desire to feel pleasure can be trapped within all these conditions that we place upon it. And then, being that pleasure is a natural state, it can rebel against us, and we can have these hedonistic outbursts of pleasure states that are beyond our complete control. It's just an interesting perspective to take into account. One can overthink anything.